Welcome back to Jones & Co. I'm Mark Latham, sitting in for Alan Jones. I'm the co-part of the Jones & Co equation, but I'm doing all the work here at the beginning of the new year. I'm joined by Ross Cameron. We're discussing issues out of Canberra today, particularly the defection of Corey Bernardi from the Liberal Party to establish his new Australian Conservative Party. We're joined in our Canberra studio by Andrew Hastie, the member for Canning, who is a Conservative inside the Liberal Party. Thanks very much for joining us, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mark. Ross, it's good to be with you.
Let's start by just getting your reaction to the day's events. I know that ideologically you'd be close to Corey Bernardi. I know you'd be disappointed with his departure from the Liberal side, but how do you confront the very serious point he's made about the disconnect between the Australian people and their parliamentary representatives?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I am disappointed. Corey is a friend, but he's also a colleague. And you're right, we do share many similarities in our political philosophy. So to lose someone with a track record like Corey from the Liberal Party is a loss. And he represented a first line of defence, if you will. He was the first bloke to stand up in February of last year and say, safe schools has to go. So it's a loss for the Liberal Party. I think, though, the question for Corey is, will he be able to maximise leverage outside the party? And only time will tell. But as to his central point about the disconnect between the political class and the Australian people, I do think he has an important point there, and we'd be remiss to deny the reality of that situation.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. What can the Liberal Party do about this serious problem? Because it's very clear that conservatism inside the Liberal Party has run into a dead end. There's a whole raft of issues where Conservatives around the country are disappointed about the failure to clean out the higher education system, the ABC, the Human Rights Commission, safe spaces, safe schools, cultural Marxism in the education system, political correctness, 18C, the list goes on and on. These are areas where Conservatives are unhappy with the performance of first the Abbott government and now the Turnbull government. What's gone wrong?
Well, I think, Mark, the central question is what sort of a country do we want to be? Do we want to have a government-centric society where the state regulates our lives? Or do we want to have a society where local communities take charge of their future? It's basically a vision of a country run by Canberra or by local communities. And I think that's what Corey's driving at. And in my community, at least in Canning, people don't really care for a lot of the ideological sympathies that you might find in the media or the political class. They worry about how they're going to pay down their mortgage, the costs of their power bills, and just getting on with life. They don't want too much interference. They love the Australian flag. They celebrate Anzac Day, and they're pretty straight up and down people. So there's a disconnect, both when it comes to economic policy, I think, but also in just a basic value set.
Well, you've raised there love of country as an issue. I don't know if you saw Louise Clegg's outstanding piece in the Australian newspaper last weekend. She had given a speech at the Centre for Independent Studies. Louise must know what she's talking about. She comes from my old school, Hurlston, at Glenfield in southwest Sydney. But her argument about values is outstanding, and she raises the question in powerful terms about love of country, where it's true. Your mainstream Australian suburban and regional resident loves Australia Day, loves Anzac Day, very patriotic and proud of our country, but it's almost like in the Australian cultural discourse that being proud of Australia and waving the flag is frowned upon by the elites. All the insiders look down their nose at this. Now, why haven't Conservatives been more effective in pushing back and aggressively putting these people in their place?
Well, I think there are pockets of Conservatives who do that. In my own case, I certainly pushed back a couple of days before Australia Day with a Facebook post, and it went off. I basically just said, enough hand-wringing, I love my flag and I'm looking forward to Australia Day. So I think we can do a far better job. But as you say, this cultural Marxism is widespread. It's in our education system, both at the tertiary and secondary levels. It's in the media. It's in a lot of places. So it's a battle that needs to be defeated by a network. General McChrystal, who was famous for his counter-terrorism machine that he built in the US military, he said, in order to defeat a network, you've got to build a network. And so I think Conservatives need to build a network to take the ground back that we've ceded over the last however many years.
Well, that's what Corey Bernardi's trying to do, Ross.
Well, I'd like to...
And
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, on that point, I'm a firm believer that in order to be effective in a Westminster political system, you've got to operate as part of a network. And so that's why, in a sense, I'm disappointed that Corey's gone, because he was part of a network and he had a central role. And how effective he will be as a crossbencher is yet to be seen.
Well, can I say that we've just seen the outgoing Obama administration, which was essentially the East Coast office of Hollywood, with just a permanent stream of celebrities going through, you know, Sting and Robert De Niro, Beyonce, whatever. Can I just say, I feel a little bit like a gushing groupie here right now, because I love Andrew Hastie. I reckon you are a great Australian. There's a very small number who have actually put their lives at risk to protect Australia's national interest. And I thought the way you conducted yourself through your original election campaign, where the attacks on you were amongst the lowest blows and the most vicious sort of tactics that we have ever seen, and you just conducted yourself with such dignity, such thoughtful intelligence, such conviction. Mate, every time I see you, I feel better about Australia. So I just want to say we need you to survive. And one of the concerns that I have is that I read on...
Thanks, Ross.
Yep, you're welcome. On current polling, you'd be gone. Now, what is your margin? Tell us.
So my margin is 6.8%, and I've got a primary vote of 50.3%. But I don't take that for granted, and frankly, with the trends as they are, I do have concern for an election in 2 years' time.
What do you think? I think Conservatives are asking themselves, there's obviously two options, right? Corey is saying, he's peeled off the glacier, he's just saying, I can't see this organism adapting to the new world in which we live. You're obviously believing that the Liberal Party, the Liberal National Coalition, is capable of hearing what is the noises that are around it, of seeing the changes taking place. Can we expect the government, for example, let's just take energy. I mean, are we going to get a red-blooded assault from this government in the spirit of Donald Trump saying we want to be an energy superpower, or are we going to get this sort of dissecting of the tea leaves, a little step to the right, you know, maybe reduce the RET by a degree or two? Where's the leadership going to come from?
Well, yeah, energy is dear to my heart. I spent the summer reading up on the RET. The RET is a silent carbon tax, and it basically transfers wealth from Australian families and Australian businesses to the pockets of the wind industry. It's a cross-subsidy that's just fleecing everyday Australians and providing money to the renewables industry, which is unreliable and costly. So the evidence is there with South Australia, and look, I think it's there for the taking. With Labor driving towards 50%, we're crazy not to be going harder. Of course, I'm a backbencher and I can speak freely on this, but that's my instinct. I think we really can mount a solid campaign against the RET and wedge Labor on it.
Well, Andrew, Ross mentioned Donald Trump. You've spent a fair bit of time over the holiday period in Trump's America. What did you see and what did you learn?
Well, I went to Nashville in Tennessee. There were 95 counties in Nashville. Only 3 of them went for Hillary Clinton. The other 92 went for Trump. This is a state that voted twice for Bill Clinton, so it's got form. And I spoke to a lot of Trump voters. I went shooting with some Trump voters. I watched the college ball final, Clemson versus Alabama, with Trump voters. So I had a good opportunity to talk to them. And largely, they're not all that enthusiastic about the president, but they're certainly glad that Hillary Clinton is not their president, and they just got sick of increasing state regulation in their lives. And Donald Trump was someone who took it up to big government, and that's why they went with him.
I've got a slightly left field in-house question to ask you, because our Sky News colleague,
sure,
who was never part of the Trump movement, Peter Van Onselen, he actually claims some credit for getting you into politics in the first place. Does he deserve any of that credit?
Peter does, actually. I got to know Peter having beers down the road from Julie Bishop's office, and pretty much the day that the late Don Randall passed away, I got a nudge from Peter, and next thing was I was in contact with Matthias Cormann, and I was in a pre-selection with 6 other Liberal candidates, and then I was elected in a by-election. So yes, PVO can take credit in that sense.
When you say he gave you a nudge, what did he do? Like, was it a text message, a phone call? What did he say?
He called through, and I screened the call because I didn't have his number at the time. And then I got another call, which I screened, and then I got a text, hey, give me a call. Rang him up, and he said, how about it? And I said, no, I've just had a baby. It's not my timeline. And he counselled me, well, mate, politics is about timing, and if you don't have a crack now, you may not have another crack in a few years. So
I heard that. I heard that he said if you don't run, he'd make you read his collected works and all his newspaper columns in one sitting, and that absolutely made you run for Canning. But just back to the United States,
okay.
you take a keen interest.
Can I just?
Yeah,
can I just add, Mark, that he said this is me at my most altruistic. We disagree pretty much on all social positions. So there you go.
Well, I want to give Peter Van Onselen, professor or associate professor as he may be, author, distinguished columnist, he's got a fair and balanced we are on this show. We give Peter Van Onselen credit for reaching out across the philosophical divide.
We do indeed. But just back on the national security agenda, you take a big interest. What do you think Trump's up to with his migration ban, and what can we learn here in the Australian context?
Well, I came back on Sunday from a trip to the US, leading the delegation from the Parliamentary Joint Committee for Intelligence and Security. And we met with members of Trump's National Security Council, and we met with congressional leaders, Senate leaders, the CIA, FBI, Pentagon, State Department. The thing I'll say about Trump is that it's going to be an administration where they take action. They certainly have a bias for action. And I think once this 30-day review being conducted by the Secretary of Defence, General Mattis, is completed, we'll get a sense of where the US is going. But I interpret the immigration ban as a precondition for upping the ante against Islamic State. I think it's about building resilience in the US border, and if they're going to cut off the head of ISIS in the Middle East, they want to make sure that they're protected as foreign fighters flow back out from the Middle East to Europe, to America, to Southeast Asia, and to Australia, most likely. So it wasn't sold well, it wasn't executed well, and I think that's where it fell down.
It's said that Australia has, through ASIO, 400 people on a watch list of possible terrorist activity in our country. Should the government be doing an analysis of where these people have come from, identify the countries and turn off the tap, as Trump has done?
Sure. Well, we already do a very good job of vetting our migration flow. So I think we already do that. But certainly, I'm sure our agencies are looking at that data in detail. I hope that we have a pattern emerging, and then we're adjusting our public policy to neutralise the threat, to minimise the threat to the Australian people.
Well, Andrew, thanks for joining us tonight. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. But if PVO can talk you into running as a Liberal candidate, I reckon there'll be a day where Ross and I can talk you into truly joining the outsider movement. You're a natural-born outsider. We love what you've got to say, and thanks for your time this evening. And that was great to talk to Andrew, and we'll be back after this short break to talk to Hedley Thomas from the Australian newspaper.